What is up, everyone? My name will be Josh. This is StrainCentral, and today we are doing a brand new episode of Open Opinions. So it's been quite a while since I've actually sat down and recorded something like this, and I think it's going to be a little fun, random topic today. So I've had quite a few people ask, especially since I am now like 4 months and 10 days sober, so I'm coming up on 5 months here. A lot of people have asked like what I actually did to stop smoking weed. I guess why I stopped smoking weed. There's a lot of like confusion around my cannabis consumption and why I'm not actually consuming. So I have went to rehab twice this year. I went to rehab at the end of last year, like November into December, and started my first stint of sobriety in January. Made it until I want to say like the end of March, coming up on April, and April is when I started smoking weed again. So I smoked weed for 42020 because that was like you can't miss 420. Um, and then I smoked all the way up through like the end of May into June. And June is when I technically relapsed on alcohol. I relapsed for about, I want to say 2 weeks. It was only like 13 days. And after those 13 days, I realized that I was going right back down the same path, and I checked myself back into rehab. So it's been a crazy year. Ever since then, I've been sober from all substances other than nicotine. And I consume quite a good bit of nicotine. I think I do need to actually slow that down. And caffeine. I've been drinking a lot of caffeine. I actually think I have a Bang back here. I'm not sponsored by Bang, but if Bang wants to sponsor me, I would be a happy man. Um, I have been sober ever since then, though. Coming up on 4 months now. And I think when it comes to cannabis consumption, I'm gonna slow my roll. I'm gonna at least get a year sobriety under my belt, and then I might reevaluate my use. But I honestly kind of feel like at that point, it's like I'm so used to right now being sober, the happiness that comes with me being sober, the lack of like ups and downs. Like I still have ups and downs when I'm sober, but when I was consuming cannabis, especially because I am bipolar, I have bipolar 2. I just found that like I would have really depressed days, like really, really low depressed days, followed by like manic periods where I'd be like doing a lot of shit and getting a lot of shit done. So when I'm sober, and I am taking some psych meds, but I'm just much more stable most of the time. I don't have those really high highs or those really low lows. I kind of just I walk through the mountains casually instead of falling down hills and rolling down hills. That's a really weird mental health analogy. But I'm kind of going to speak today on like what I did to stop consuming cannabis, how it's been, how I feel, and how it's affected my career. Because it's obviously weird that I have a channel called StrainCentral. I founded my entire career specifically on cannabis consumption, and now I'm not really consuming, so it's a weird shift. A lot of people have suggested I change the channel name to like Brain Central, or I take Strain Central out of it, but I think that's personally just kind of ridiculous. I had a small part in forming the cannabis community. Like, there really was not a cannabis community before I started, and I'm not saying I was like the major part or a huge part, but I did play a small role in normalizing cannabis use on the internet. Like, there was plenty of people that paved the path before me. Paul Token, Marijuana Man, the list goes on and on and on. There was plenty of the CCC 420. There was plenty of people that did it before me, but I was like right in that hot spot, right in that sweet spot of like things kind of taking off, legalization happening across the country, medically, state-wise, and then recreationally followed that. But I feel like changing my name, it just wouldn't do justice to the work I've done in my career. Like, this is probably my 6th or 7th year of being a YouTuber. My first year and a half, I was just, I was still working a restaurant job. I was still working pretty much full time. So YouTube wasn't technically a career. But once I passed like 1 or 200,000 subscribers, this became my career. And it's something that I've had a lot of fun with. Like, I've traveled, the United States, even kind of the world, because of my job. I've had a world of opportunities afforded to me. And the life I've lived has been very awesome. And that's 100% because of you guys. Like, I just sit down and talk to cameras. Without you guys consuming the content, without you guys spreading the content, sharing the content, it would go nowhere. So I always said that Strain Central is not me. Strain Central is our community that we have built together. And it is kind of weird not consuming cannabis. I'm very comfortable being around it. It's not like when I see a joint or when I smell weed, I have to run over and fucking hit that joint. Like it's a lot less of an issue for me than things like alcohol. So the reason I went to rehab is not because of cannabis, even though I was kind of excessively abusing cannabis. Um, it was mostly because of alcohol. Alcohol and Adderall were my two really big downfalls. I would drink probably anywhere from about a fifth to a half gallon of vodka a day, and I did that for several years' time, to the point that I was so physically addicted to alcohol that I spent time in the hospitals. I went to rehab twice. I had plenty of grand mal seizures, which any single one of those could have killed me. So I'm absurdly lucky to even be, sitting here talking to this camera today. A lot of people that fall deep into the depths of addiction don't really have the chance to get out of it a lot of the time. So I'm very, very lucky that I got out of it and that I'm actually able to live a sober life. But there has been a little bit of change in my life. Like the pace has changed, my thoughts have changed, the way I'm doing things has changed a little bit. I'm living in a sober house right now, so I'm not living on my own like I have since I was 19. I have a roommate, so my schedule it has to kind of be worked around another person. But I'm also just kind of learning how to be a normal adult, and I'm learning that at 25. Um, I looking back really wish that I would have utilized a few things like my parents, like staying with my parents until I was, 23, 24. I would have saved hundreds of thousands in, living expenses, living on my own. And I think I also probably wouldn't have fallen so far down into the depths of addiction because they are also fellow addicts, so they kind of understand and see the tell signs of when I was actually becoming addicted. And honestly, without my family, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now. My family 100% like helped me through the really dark times that I had, and without them, I would not be alive. More than likely, I would probably be like homeless out in some fucking street. They just kind of caught me before I fell so far into that hole that I couldn't dig myself out. So I I would have to say like I've still got a lot of, cannabis topics and stuff on my mind. It's not like because I'm not consuming cannabis, I'm still not an activist. I'm still a part of the industry. I still pay attention to what's going on. I'm just not consuming. And there's a lot of people that are like farmers or, work in the industry that don't smoke that I feel like the cannabis industry kind of looks down on. They're like, oh, you're just using this industry? You're not one of us? And I feel like that's not really the case here. Like, I've used cannabis for a long time. I'm very familiar with it. It's like going to school for, physical therapy or whatever the fuck you call it. Massaging. Physical therapy and massaging are two very different things. You go to masseuse school and you stop, massaging people one day. It's not like you didn't learn all of the fucking shit you learned in school. I kind of apply that to me and my cannabis knowledge. It's like I learned about this shit for years. I was one of the most, like, in my opinion, educational weed tubers at the time. A lot of people have kind of stepped into that position, like Eric Kahn, and there's a couple more out there that actually kind of give, like, the cannabis education thing. But I was always specifically focused on responsible consumption and cannabis education. And I feel like both of those things I can speak pretty heavily to still, especially responsible cannabis consumption, because I've consumed cannabis responsibly and I've abused cannabis, and you can learn from me to see where the active abuse of cannabis will lead you. It's not into a good place. It's probably into a rehab center, or it's probably to a very low point in your life. And it's not to say there's not people out there that are able to consume cannabis in excessive amounts every day and still live a pretty proactive, helpful, like actually active life. For me, it was the other substances that kind of combined, and it just became a thing where I wasn't able to do anything almost ever. Um, it's kind of weird because the freedoms that this job provided me were also kind of a downfall for me. I was always able to be home. I worked from home. I set my own schedule. I made videos on my time. And you could kind of see as my addiction progressed, I went from like making one or two videos a day to like one video a week to like one video a month. And then it was like I might not even make a video every month because I was so fucked up all the time. So I wouldn't say that I was like living a double life, but I was not really actively talking about how bad of an addict I was at that time. And I think that's why now I'm so open to speaking about stuff like this, is because that's something I lived through. That's something I did. And I want to be a role model for a lot of you to not go down that path and learn the lessons the hard way like I had to. Um, I personally don't think cannabis is a bad thing. I think that most people can use cannabis entirely fine every single day and not have an issue. And there's a big difference between addiction and dependence. A lot of people are dependent on cannabis for sleep, for food, for anxiety, for depression, whatever it is, but they might not necessarily be addicted. Because addiction, by definition, means that it's something that negatively impacts your life. And I would say that I was probably heavily dependent on cannabis, whereas I was addicted to alcohol and I was addicted to other substances. So it's something that I can kind of objectively look back on and be like, okay, those substances were damn near killing me. That substance was more of something that I just kind of excessively used. And I'm not saying people can't get addicted to weed. I personally think that people 100% can become addicted to weed, especially people with addicted personalities. But if we kind of broaden that topic, people can get addicted to McDonald's. People can get addicted to sugar. People can get addicted to sex. Addiction is something that can pretty much happen with anything. And when you're dealing with a psychoactive substance like cannabis, it's just the same thing. It's very well people can actually get addicted to it. I'm addicted to nicotine as I rip my e-cig. So I would actually say I'm probably at this point more dependent on nicotine, as I'm not smoking cigarettes, I'm not hurting myself to the nth degree like I was when I was like smoking packs of cigarettes a day. This is more something that I'm just dependent on to, deal with my anxiety. Probably there is a level of addiction, but it's not really ruined my life yet. 20 years from now, when we figure out vaping something that fucking ruins your lungs, that might be a different story. But as of now, at this point, I'm more dependent than addicted. So there is a distinction between those two things. Um, but yeah, so when I actually quit smoking weed, it was a pretty hard process for me, and I want to say that's because I kind of went cold turkey on all substances in rehab. Alcohol I was physically dependent and addicted to, and my body was dependent on it. So what happens when you're actually alcohol withdrawing or withdrawing from alcohol? You get the shakes, you get the sweats, you get nauseous, you get vomity, you throw up a fuck ton. And then if you're like a heavy drinker, and I was diagnosed as a late stage alcoholic at 24, I was having seizures. I was having hallucinations. They call it delirium tremens, which involves active hallucinations. The grand mal seizures you have can actually physically kill you. There's really only two substances that when you're withdrawing from them, you can very well die, and that's benzos and alcohol. Um, Opiates have a really shitty withdrawal. You're sweating, you feel like you have the flu, but people don't normally die from opiate withdrawal, whereas alcohol withdrawals kill people every single day in this country. Same thing with benzos. So I was withdrawing from everything at once. In rehab, they don't let you have caffeine. I couldn't even have sugar. I think at the very first couple days, you could have like juices, so you could have like a little bit of sugar. But when I went to my first rehab in November, it really wasn't that bad. I detoxed at the hospital 3 days before I actually went into treatment. So I had my withdrawals in the hospital where they kind of just like doped me up with benzos and made sure I wasn't having constant seizures. Whereas the second time, I was, 4 months sober before I actually started consuming alcohol, consumed alcohol for 2 weeks' time. So in my head, I wasn't thinking I was going to have these awful, horrible withdrawal symptoms, not syndromes. And I actually went into rehab the first day, the first night there. I had a seizure. I had a grand mal seizure in the bathroom. I was going to the bathroom in like the middle of the night. Was feeling along the wall to try to find the light switch because I couldn't find it. Because they did have me kind of doped up on some kind of benzo. And I ended up having a seizure, falling, smacking my head against the door. And the person in the other room thought I like punched the wall. So they came into the room and checked on me. and I was laying on the floor of the bathroom. My face was starting to kind of turn like white. My lips were kind of starting to turn blue. And he ran out, called the actual treatment people. The people had an ambulance there in like 4 minutes. And I almost died right there. I almost literally died my first day of rehab. Grand mal seizures kill people every single year, and that was a pretty severe grand mal seizure. So I stayed a couple days in the hospital, went back to rehab, and I had 4 more seizures in the following 9 days. So in my first 9 days of rehab, I had 5 seizures, and I couldn't walk at that point. Like my legs were so weak, my body was so weak that I was using a little, what do they call them? It's not canes. It's like those little things you have like wheels. They're not called stretchers either. Walkers. I couldn't think of the word walker. Oh my gosh. I was using a walker for about the first week, week and a half because my body was so weak from constantly having seizures. I was talking in slurs. It's almost kind of like I had like mini strokes, but they were just seizures. And it was an awful first 10 days that I almost honestly remember none of. They also had me on, I think, like Ativan or something when I was there. No, Librium is what it's called. We kind of joked in rehab about the Librium shuffle. When you go in, they usually give you something to not have seizures, and it's a benzo called Librium, and it would make people walk like along the wall, like holding themselves up on the wall because they were so fucked up the first couple days. And it was just not a fun experience. Like, I legitimately thought I was going to die many times. I was just not in a stable headspace because I was withdrawing from alcohol, so I was convinced the treatment center was against me, even though it's one of the things that realistically saved my life. After about 10 days, I kind of got a little bit used to, like, being sober. My body was kind of starting to readjust, and I really kind of just dove in head first and tried to get as much out of that treatment as I could have because I just didn't want to be back there. Like, I remember packing my bags during the first rehab thinking, I will never come back here again. That was a long 30 days. Fuck coming back here ever again. I'm going to be sober forever. And then, 5 months later, I'm right back in the same place because I called them drunk at midnight and was like, do you guys have any beds? And they're like, yeah. When can you be in? I was like, tomorrow. And I woke up the next day and had to pack all my shit and go right back to treatment. So it's one of those things that, like, I am working recovery programs at this point because I don't want to relapse and go back down that road. Do I think cannabis was a part of my relapse? Personally, not really. I think that I was just not founded enough in my sobriety. I didn't have the support systems around me. I didn't have anything really around me other than my family, which I think there was a level of stress there because, they're watching me under a fucking microscope, making sure I don't make the same dumb decisions. And that really isn't being an adult. So now being on my own in the house like this, in a recovery house, I have the support system around me that I need. I am fully committing to the recovery programs that I'm working because my life fucking depends on it. So it's I would say like withdrawals from cannabis comparatively to alcohol, you're comparing a fucking cherry to a grapefruit. They're not the same at all. But that's not to say that cannabis does not have withdrawal symptoms. There is a level of anxiety. Some people struggle to eat. Some people struggle to sleep. There's aspects of cannabis withdrawal that are physical. And a lot of people like to say that cannabis withdrawal is only a mental thing. I personally disagree with that. There is many aspects of cannabis withdrawal that are inherently physical. But compared to other withdrawals, it's child's play. It's really nothing at all. It doesn't mean that the withdrawals from cannabis, the lack of appetite, the lack of sleep, the anxiety, all that, those probably do make a lot of people still continue to consume cannabis all the time. A lot of people don't like taking tolerance breaks because they have to experience what are cannabis withdrawal symptoms. But it's pretty possible and pretty easy to take a tolerance break to stop smoking if you really want to. I would just say supplement with melatonin. Find ways to force yourself to eat. And try to keep yourself occupied, try to keep your time occupied, try to keep doing stuff constantly, play video games, work out, go on a walk. You're going to be able to find things that you can actually kind of enjoy doing sober that take the time up and make it a lot easier to stop consuming if you would want to. Vaping them fucking fat clouds, bruh. I have found for me, I know it's probably kind of weird to see me actually using nicotine. I've for years been very adamantly against nicotine. I smoked in high school, and then I stopped smoking when I started smoking weed. And I think there's a part of it for me that's just like the oral fixation. I just like fucking smoking things and making clouds and shit. So I feel like once I stopped using cannabis in specifically in rehab, everyone smokes, man. It's like you need something. You need something to get through those days. So I think I went through 6 cartons of cigarettes in the 30 days that I was there this last time. And that's mostly because like I was in a position where I could kind of afford cigarettes. A lot of people in the treatment center were not in that position, so I was just giving them out. I was giving out probably like a pack of cigarettes a day or something like that. At least 10 cigarettes a day. And the funny thing is, like, you make really good friends in a rehab center. Like, there's people who I still to this day talk to consistently that I would consider myself to be, like, good friends with. And it's crazy because there's people from all walks of life. It's people that you probably wouldn't interact with on a normal daily basis. But realistically, most of you are there to battle the same problems and issues. And it was kind of weird because I was probably the only under 30-year-old there that was in there for alcohol. A lot of the kids that were in there, like 18 to 25, were in there for specifically benzos or opiates. So I feel like that's kind of the new addiction plague that's like haunting our youth. And then a lot of alcoholics don't consider themselves to be alcoholics until later in life. So I feel like I am kind of really lucky in that aspect that I caught my alcoholism young. I may have, sprinted in my youth. It's not like I, drank a couple beers a night and was like, "Oh, I'm an alcoholic." No, I was drinking close to a half gallon of Tito's every night. Waking up at 6 in the morning, going to the 7-Eleven, shaking so hard that I couldn't put my debit card in the machine when I was buying more alcohol. And I had a really crazy experience. I think it was last week. I was in 7-Eleven and I was buying an energy drink and a pack of cigarettes. And the guy in front of me, I noticed he had some alcohol in his hand and was shaking really bad. And I was like, man, thank my higher power that I'm not there because I've been there before. It's not a fun place to be. And then I looked up at his face and it was actually someone I went to treatment with. And I couldn't muster up the courage to say anything to him. And it's none of my business with his drinking's none of my business. Most of the programs you work are going to teach that it's not about advertising. It's about just being a sober person, being a light, and people want to follow that. So I didn't say anything to him, but all day that just like haunted me. That I'm really lucky to be sitting here able to say I'm 4 months and 12 days, 10 days, whatever it is, sober. Because I was once right there. I was once struggling to wake up every morning, waking up in the morning at like 4, withdrawing, taking a shot so I could go back to bed and pretend like I was sleeping for when Kristen would wake up. And then she would wake up, I would like sneak a couple drinks around her schedule. She would leave, and then I would actually get to really drink it every day. And I would drink until I passed out at night. And it's crazy because like in the depths of alcohol, you just do stupid shit. You fucking piss yourself. You throw up all over yourself. You're not able to take care of yourself. And it's a very sad version of the people that we are. Like, most alcoholics are genuinely not bad people. They are just addicted to a substance that's ruling their life. And it's really hard for anyone who's not an addict to relate. So that's why in rehab you become really good friends. That's why there's programs that we all, support each other, because you can support each other a lot better when you've been there. Like some of the stories that I would sit and tell to you, you wouldn't understand unless you've been there. And it makes us seem like very sad, broken down people. And in the depths of addiction, we kind of were. Like, we're spiritually dead. We're physically almost dead. We're mentally dead. We're just not able to, eloquently express our thoughts. We're not able to be the people that we want to be. And there's a lot of ego tied up into my addiction, at least. I know on camera, I don't usually tend to come off as the most, ego inflated person. I try my hardest to be humble because I'm very glad and lucky to be in this position, being able to talk to a camera for a living. But when I was drinking, it's like that ego would inflate and I would see myself as this fucking god, which I can sit here right now and tell you I'm not. I'm a very flawed human that is still struggling with sobriety. I'm working my program and surrounding myself in the proper support systems. But on days like today, where the country's very well going to shit, it's like I can't say I didn't wake up this morning and think, man, it would be really nice to smoke or it would be really nice to drink. And obviously, I play the tape in my head and push those thoughts out of my head because they're just not going to be conducive to a positive life. Like, if I ever pick up a drink again, I know I will never be able to socially drink or just have a drink again. Because I pick up one drink and 15 follow. And then that follows for days. Days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, and then I'm very well dead. So, I've put myself in a lot of situations physically, and also just put myself, like, I guess, mostly physically, in harm's way. Like, alcohol almost killed me. I made a video about that a while ago, and I'm still genuinely, that's the truth for me, is alcohol very well almost killed me. With the seizures I had constantly, I spent, I spent like 7 or 8 days in the ICU. This was before I ever even thought about going to rehab, and that was one of the first times that I stopped drinking. I was trying to get it cold turkey. I had someone drive me to the hospital. As soon as I walked into the hospital, I had my first grand mal seizure. 2 grand mal seizures followed after that in the hospital, and I was in the ICU for like 6 7 days hallucinating, and the hallucinations were terrifying because they were so real. Like I remember a couple. I'll just talk about a couple of them. One of the most the easiest to remember for me is they had these seizure guard pillows on the side of my bed, and I was like laying in my bed, and every time I would blink, there would be something else in the pillow. So I'd blink, and there'd be like some fishes swimming around in the pillow. I'd blink, and there'd be like a dead body in the pillow. And I'd blink, and there'd be like, oh, some like funny little animals in the pillow. I'd blink, and there'd be snakes. So like I was learning how to like change channels of my like hallucination in my mind. And another one that I know my family remembers, and they've kind of relayed this to me and told me this, is I was laying in bed and I was looking out the window because this was after I was out of the ICU, but I was still in there for like 3 days after the ICU. Was laying in bed looking out the window, and I could have sworn there was a party going on the roof. And there was like a giraffe, and there was like an airplane, and there was a bunch of stuff that just like logically didn't make any sense. It wouldn't be on the roof. And I actually have recordings on my phone, if you go back and watch the Alcohol Almost Killed Me video, of that situation. It was just a fucking light and like a couple of vents that my brain was literally like turning into these crazy hallucinations. So it's really scary that that's something that's sold in almost every store, alcohol. My bad about that. My camera seemed to die there, but we're back. As I was saying, it's crazy that alcohol is sold in, almost every fucking store out there. It's crazy that it's something that's so societally accepted. And I guess the hardest part about it is like they can't really put a label on alcohol that says some of you are going to get addicted to this. It's going to ruin your fucking life, which is the truth. But the companies aren't going to say, because alcoholics are a small minority of the alcohol consumers. A lot of people can just have one drink, can just have a couple drinks. But with addictive tendencies and addictive personalities, which a lot of the time are genetic, some people really can't have drinks, or else it will lead to a very dark path that usually ends in either jails, institutions, mental institutions, or dying. And it's a really shit path to go down. I do not wish alcoholism or drug addiction on my worst enemy because it's fucking miserable. And it's really hard for not just the addict, but everyone around the addict. People they're friends with, people they're in relationships with, for their family, because they're all watching someone essentially kill themselves slowly in front of them. And I think for me, it was genetic. My great grandpa, my grandpa, my parents, like, I come from a long line of addicts, so that the apple didn't fall far from the tree. But I also think the fact that I have bipolar 2 didn't help that either. Like, I was put in a position where my drug counselor liked to tell me I was like a pyro in a fireworks shop. I, had the money and I had the resources to sit the fuck around all day and do nothing but get fucked up. And the crazy part is, like, it didn't start with me excessively consuming. Like, yeah, I would drink a little more than my friends. We'd go out bar hopping. They'd all have, 3 or 4 drinks. I'd have 5 or 6. I'd probably, and towards the end, I would pregame before I went out with my friends. So I'd drink, 5, 6 shots. Then I would go out and have like 6, 7 drinks with my friends. Then I would get home, keep drinking. So the party never really stopped for me. And towards the end, I was drinking around the clock. I was waking up withdrawing. I was drinking then. I was drinking all throughout the day. I was drinking before I went to bed. I didn't really even go to bed. I usually just passed the fuck out. And it ruined a lot of friendships. It ruined the relationships in my life. And it hurt a lot of the people that were very close to me. Because my actions were just not that of a sane human being. I couldn't have a fucking conversation. I couldn't really communicate without lying out my fucking teeth constantly. It is something that I know a lot of people around me, it hurt them. So amends are a part of the recovery program I'm working, and that's been one of the hardest parts so far, is looking someone in their face and being like, you know what, I was a fuck up. I did a lot of harm to you. What can I do to help that? What can I do to change that? And it's been hard, but it's also been one of the most fulfilling parts about being in a recovery program and being sober, is the fact that I can keep the same peace of mind throughout the day. I can have a conversation with someone. I can communicate healthily. I can set boundaries in relationships. So there's a lot of things that I'm learning now that if I was not an addict, I don't think I would have ever learned, or I wouldn't have learned them until much later in life. So I think the things that I've gone through have kind of matured me in a sense. And I've always been a relatively mature person. I've always been a little bit more mature for my age than most others around me. But when I fell into the depths and the grips of addiction, I wasn't mature at all. I was a fucking child. And like, I was a child with trauma. And a lot of the times what happens with people that have trauma is, especially when they're in like the throes of addiction, they revert back to their trauma state whenever the trauma happened. So for me, it was young. I was like 10, 12. I was probably acting a lot of the time like a teenager or like a pre-teenager. And a pre-teenager in a 23, 24-year-old's body is not conducive to anything. So I think that there's been a lot of positive that's come out of my addiction, which is crazy to say. A lot of negative came from it, but now that I'm out of that, I'm able to kind of make the correct positive turns and make some amends with people that I've hurt and try to go down a path that I didn't think I would ever be going down. I didn't think that I would be saying, when I was 21 with a huge YouTube following, kind of on top of the world, I didn't think I was going to say 2 years later I'd be in a treatment in a rehab center twice in a year. But that's one of the crazy things about even like rehab's just kind of putting a band-aid on a gaping wound. Like, if you do not get out of rehab and continue to work a program of recovery or continue to try to stay sober and keep recovering, it's not going to work. There's people that go to rehab 10, 15, 30 times. I had met someone in there that had gone to rehab 4 times that year. It's like, towards the second one or the third one, you're going to have to realize that the rehab center it's just keeping you away from substances for a while. Once you get out, that's when the genuine real work starts and begins. I would honestly say a big part of sobriety and, maintaining sobriety is changing your life entirely. Like, I am still an influencer, if you want to call me that. I still make online content, but at the same time, I've kind of had to re-change all of my routines, re-change, the ways that I make money. I had to change a lot of things in my life, and I couldn't just pick up everything as normal, pick up where I left off, and continue down a path of just like excessive cannabis consumption. I know a lot of you would probably prefer me to constantly be smoking weed, and someday in the future, you might get strain reviews or something. I don't really know where my path's going to lead me. I just know for my first few years of sobriety, it's not something I can just jump back into. And there's been a lot of people that are like, well, fuck you, I'm fucking unsubscribing if this isn't a fucking weed channel. And I fully understand that sentiment. You're allowed to. If you don't want to hear me talk about my experiences in recovery, if you don't want to hear me talk about my experiences in maturing and growth, I get it. And I think some of that's coming from a place of there's people out there that don't want to grow up. They just want to continue going down the path that they go down and, keep consuming excessive cannabis content and keep consuming excessive cannabis themselves. And they're allowed to. I'm not one that can judge, nor can I really change those experiences if you don't want to listen to me. But I do want to, for the people that are listening, make sure you guys don't go down that path. If you're struggling with alcohol, if you're struggling with excessive cannabis consumption, know that you can get better. It can change if you work for it. Recovery is a very, very, very tiresome thing for some people, but there's a lot of reward if you actually genuinely take the time to work on yourself, to break down that ego, to understand what you're going through, and to overcome. It's a lot of people that were in the situation I am, if they were an influencer or if they, were like a pseudo celebrity, don't want to talk about this shit. They don't want to talk about their struggles. They want to hide that and just continue doing what they do and hoping no one noticed. But that's not me. I have always been kind of hyper realistic with you guys. I've been very real with you. And I felt like when I was consuming substances constantly, I could always kind of hide under the guise like, oh, I'm high. I'm not fucking drunk and fucked up on Adderall. No, I'm just high, which wasn't the case. So now I kind of want to talk about those experiences. So maybe you can look for, things in yourself or people that you know and kind of check them a little bit. Check them with love. Be like, are you okay? Is your mental health okay? Are you doing anything that's harming you? And that's exactly what I want to propose to you guys today. Is like, if you're listening to this right now, are you doing okay? Are you hurting? Are you fucking losing your minds in the state that our country lives in if you're in the US? Are you happy every day? Is your life fulfilling? What are you doing with your life? What are you doing with your time? Could you be doing more? Do you want to do more? Those are questions I ask myself every day. And my routine has changed a lot. I meditated a lot more. I try to lift every day. I'm not malnourished anymore. A lot of a lot of people, I fucking hate you for saying this. I've had so many people in my life say this recently. Oh, you look healthy. Oh, Josh, you look so healthy. It's like, I know, I gained weight. But thank you for calling it healthy, and that's not even true, because some of the comments are just like, yo, Josh got fat on us. Oh, I'm aware. I have gained a little bit of weight. I think one of the most passive aggressive ones I saw were like, so you know that sugar addiction's still an addiction, right? Just like this is a secret way for saying I got a little bit fat. Yes, okay. Some of it's bulking, some of it's muscle, but yes, I have put on a few pounds. Some of the shirts I wear are a little bit tighter than they used to be. I think back to like my main topic though. What can you do to stop cannabis consumption if you would like to, and make it less of a process? First off, just check yourself and make sure you actually want to. There is, in the addiction cycle, denial is a large part of it. Some people live in denial for their entire life. But like, be honest with yourself in your cannabis consumption. Try to look at it from an objective view. Is it hindering relationships? Is it hindering things in your life? Is it hindering opportunities? Are you not, going and get the job you want to because you know they're going to drug test and you're going to fail because you pissed dirty? like I said, is it affecting friendships, relationships? When it starts affecting those things, you're bordering on the line of addiction. And if I can, my entire career was founded around this substance. If I can take a few steps back and check myself, you can do the same. I have no doubt about it. It's something that takes willpower and it takes planning to do. Go get your melatonin, go get some food that's easy to eat, and just don't surround yourself with the substance constantly. Put your bongs away for a couple weeks. Hide weed. Oh shit, you just saved $80 and you can go get something that you've been wanting to, but haven't been able to get because you've been spending money on weed. For me, weed was very expensive. I was spending $200-300 a week on weed and justifying it as, well, it's my job, it's my career. There's no tax write off for weed though. So I was just spending a fuck ton on substances, to be honest. And then I would go be getting fifths or half gallons of alcohol every day too. So I basically wrapped up my party stage and my addiction stage all kind of in the same package. And one of the hardest parts for addicts is like I look back on my consumption. I had a lot of fun times. I was traveling the world, fucking drinking and partying and having this grand time. And sometimes my euphoric recall comes back and it's like, remember those fun times you had when you were drinking wine in Colorado or when you were fucking bar hopping with your friends? It's like, yeah, I had a lot of really fun times, but if I play the tape forward, I can also remember laying in a hospital bed, vomiting, sweating, shaking, hallucinating. I know where a drink would lead me now, and it's not to that euphoric place that my brain wants to try to tell me. It's a very dangerous, very dark place that hurts everyone in my life. So, I saw someone say in a comment the other day, you've lost the light in your eyes, you've lost the spark in your life, you must hate being sober. No, I really don't. Um, it's not the same as it was, and I think, like I've said a couple times in this, people don't like change, but change was so necessary for me, and it's genuinely brought me a new happiness that I didn't know before. I I'll be honest, I've had imposter syndrome the entire time I've been a YouTuber. I have a lot of self-esteem issues. At least I didn't love myself for a long time. I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel like I deserved anything. I feel like I deserved, nothing at all. And a lot of that's trauma that is manifesting in unhealthy ways. But that's kind of what sobriety's given me personally, is an insight of who I actually am, what I want to do with my life, what makes me happy. And one of the things that makes me the happiest is just sitting down and talking to you guys. Hopefully allowing you to learn from some of my mistakes, telling my story, telling my truth, and it's making me shape myself into a person that I like, that I can look in the mirror every day and be like, God damn, you're sexy, you're fucking killing it, bud. It's not like the negative self-deprecating talk where you used to look in the mirror and be like, bro, you look like shit. Who the fuck are you? I know who I am now, and that's something that I'm still learning by the day. I will continue to keep learning in this journey, but I like who I am, and that right there is a gift that I don't think I could even pay for. No amount of money or fame would bring me that happiness of knowing who the fuck I really am. So, I think that's about all I have for today's episode, guys. This was a little bit of a short one, only like 40 minutes, but we're getting back into the swing of things, I'm getting back into the rambly state and remembering how to do this. If you guys don't already know, StrainCentral.net has all my podcasts, some of my old videos, has some product reviews, some merch. I will actually be doing a glass line here over the next few months. I'll have some more beakers available, so for those that are still consuming, I'll have those on the website, StrainCentral.net. Go check it out. I spent a couple hours kind of focusing that and getting it all set up and put together. So, alright guys, stay positive, stay medicated. Peace, friends.